Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood at attention outside Admiral Captain Harrison's office aboard the USS Leviathan, one of the Navy's most advanced destroyers. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the ship's hull, but her focus remained fixed on the door before her. She had been summoned for what she assumed would be a routine briefing about the upcoming joint training exercise with SEAL Team 7. Sarah had earned her position through 15 years of dedicated service, starting as a young ensign fresh from the Naval Academy. Her record was spotless, decorated with commendations for tactical excellence and leadership under pressure. She had commanded 3 successful missions in hostile waters and had the respect of every sailor under her command. Yet she knew that some of the old guard still questioned whether a woman belonged in such positions of authority. The door opened, and Admiral Captain Harrison emerged, his weathered face bearing the stern expression that had become his trademark. At 62, he was a career naval officer who had risen through the ranks during a time when the Navy was predominantly male. His gray hair was perfectly groomed, his uniform immaculate, and his posture rigid with decades of military discipline. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," he said curtly, gesturing for her to enter his office. The office was spartanly decorated, with maritime charts covering one wall and photographs of Harrison's various commands displayed on another. A large desk dominated the center of the room, its surface organized with military precision. Sarah noticed several files stacked neatly to one side, including what appeared to be her own personnel record. "Sir, reporting as ordered," Sarah said, maintaining her formal stance. Harrison walked around his desk but remained standing, a deliberate power move that Sarah recognized but chose to ignore. He picked up her file and flipped through it slowly, his eyes scanning the pages with theatrical attention. "15 years of service," he said finally, his tone neutral. "Graduated 3rd in your class from Annapolis. Multiple commendations. Clean record." He closed the file and set it down with a sharp tap. "On paper, you look impressive." Sarah sensed the qualifier coming. She had dealt with officers like Harrison before, men who paid lip service to women's achievements while harboring deep reservations about their capabilities. "However," Harrison continued, confirming her suspicions, "this upcoming exercise is different from anything you've handled before. We're talking about coordinating with elite special operations forces, not managing routine naval operations. The SEALs don't have time for hand-holding or sensitivity training." The slight was subtle, but unmistakable. Sarah felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression neutral. "Sir, I'm confident in my ability to execute the mission as briefed." Harrison's laugh was cold and dismissive. "Confidence is one thing, Commander. Reality is another. These SEALs have been operating in combat zones where split-second decisions mean the difference between life and death. They're not going to take orders from someone who's spent most of her career in administrative roles." The accusation was both inaccurate and insulting. Sarah had commanded ships in active patrol areas and had made countless critical decisions under pressure. Her administrative experience was limited to the necessary paperwork that came with command positions. "With respect, sir, my record shows extensive operational experience," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her growing irritation. "Does it?" Harrison opened her file again and made a show of reading specific entries. "I see logistics coordination, personnel management, training exercises. Where exactly do I find the combat experience that would prepare you to work with Navy SEALs?" Sarah knew that Harrison was deliberately mischaracterizing her record. She had participated in several combat operations, including a rescue mission in the South China Sea that had earned her a Navy Commendation Medal. But she also knew that arguing with a superior officer in his own office would be both futile and career-damaging. "Sir, I believe my experience speaks for itself," she said, diplomatically. Harrison closed the file and leaned against his desk, assuming a casual posture that somehow made his next words more cutting. "Let me be frank with you, Commander. This assignment came down from higher up, and I don't have the luxury of choosing my personnel. But I want to be clear about expectations. The SEALs are professionals who demand excellence. They won't make allowances for political correctness or diversity initiatives." The implication was clear, and Sarah felt her anger rising. She had never asked for special treatment or considerations based on her gender. Every promotion, every assignment, every commendation had been earned through merit and performance. To suggest otherwise was not only insulting, but demonstrably false. "I understand the importance of the mission, sir," she replied, fighting to keep her voice level. "Do you?" Harrison stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the ocean. "Because if you fail, it reflects on this ship, on this crew, and ultimately on me. The SEALs will judge not just you, but the entire Navy's decision-making process. They'll question whether we're more concerned with appearances than with operational effectiveness." Sarah realized that Harrison wasn't just expressing his own doubts, he was actively undermining her authority before the mission even began. By suggesting that her assignment was based on politics rather than merit, he was setting her up for failure and giving the SEALs reason to question her competence. "Sir, I've worked with Special Operations Forces before," she said, trying a different approach. "I understand their culture and their expectations." Harrison turned back to face her, his expression skeptical. "Have you? Because my experience with special ops personnel is that they have little patience for officers who try to manage them from behind a desk. They expect their commanders to have walked the walk, not just talked the talk." The conversation was becoming increasingly frustrating for Sarah. Harrison seemed determined to paint her as an inexperienced bureaucrat, despite evidence to the contrary in her own file. She wondered if he had even bothered to read her actual record, or if he had simply decided that no woman could be qualified for this type of assignment. "The SEALs will be arriving tomorrow morning," Harrison continued, moving back to his desk. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez will brief you on the operational details, but I want you to understand something clearly. These men are among the elite warriors in the world. They've earned their reputation through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. They don't suffer fools gladly, and they don't give respect that hasn't been earned." Sarah nodded, though she suspected that Harrison's definition of earning respect might be different for her than it would be for a male officer. "Understood, sir." "I hope so," Harrison said, sitting down behind his desk. "Because if this goes badly, it won't just be your career on the line. The Navy's credibility with Special Operations Command could be damaged for years to come." The weight of that responsibility wasn't lost on Sarah, but she also recognized it as another form of pressure designed to make her doubt herself. Harrison was essentially holding her responsible, not just for her own performance, but for the Navy's entire relationship with the SEALs. "Is there anything specific about the mission parameters that I should know, sir?" Sarah asked, attempting to redirect the conversation toward practical matters. Harrison pulled out a different folder and opened it. "The exercise involves a simulated hostage rescue scenario. The SEALs will be conducting the primary assault while your team provides naval support and extraction capabilities. Coordination will be critical, and there's no room for miscommunication or hesitation." Sarah nodded. This type of coordination was exactly the kind of operation she had trained for extensively. She was confident in her ability to manage the naval support elements while maintaining clear communication with the SEAL team. "The scenario assumes a hostile environment with limited visibility and multiple unknown variables," Harrison continued. "The SEALs will need real-time intelligence updates, weather monitoring, and immediate extraction support if things go wrong. Your job is to anticipate their needs and respond accordingly." "Yes, sir. I've reviewed similar scenarios in my previous assignments." Harrison's expression suggested he doubted the relevance of her previous experience. "This isn't a training exercise, Commander. The SEALs treat every operation as if it were real combat, because that's the only way they know how to operate. They won't slow down to explain things or repeat instructions." Sarah was beginning to understand that Harrison's concerns went beyond simple doubts about her competence. He seemed genuinely worried that any failure on her part would reflect poorly on his own leadership. In his mind, assigning a female officer to work with elite special operations forces was a risk that he had been forced to take against his better judgment. "Sir, I want to assure you that I take this responsibility seriously," Sarah said. "I have no intention of letting down the ship, the crew, or the SEALs." Harrison studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching for something. Perhaps he was looking for signs of doubt or uncertainty that would justify his concerns. Whatever he was seeking, he apparently didn't find it because his expression remained skeptical. We'll see, he said finally. Report to the briefing room at 0800 tomorrow. The SEAL team leader will outline their operational requirements, and you'll coordinate with Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez on naval support elements. Yes, sir. And Commander, Harrison added as she turned to leave, remember that perception is often as important as reality. The SEALs will be watching everything you do, evaluating every decision you make. They're not just judging your competence, they're judging whether the Navy knows what it's doing. Sarah paused at the door. I understand, sir. As she left Harrison's office, Sarah felt a mixture of anger and determination. She had faced skepticism before, but rarely had it been so openly expressed by a superior officer. Harrison's comments had crossed the line from reasonable concern into outright prejudice, and she knew that overcoming his expectations would require flawless performance. Walking through the ship's corridors, Sarah reflected on the challenges ahead. She would have to prove herself not just to the SEALs, but also to her own commanding officer who had already decided she was likely to fail. The burden of representation was familiar, but no less frustrating. Every mistake would be attributed to her gender rather than to individual error, while successes would be dismissed as lucky exceptions. But Sarah had not reached her current position by backing down from challenges or accepting other people's limitations on her potential. She had faced skeptical instructors at the Naval Academy, dismissive colleagues in her early assignments, and patronizing superior officers who questioned her fitness for command. Each time, she had responded with professionalism, competence, and unshakable determination. Tomorrow would bring a new test, but Sarah was ready. She would work with the SEALs as an equal partner, demonstrating that her assignment was based on merit rather than politics. She would coordinate the mission with the same skill and precision that had earned her every previous promotion. And she would do it all while maintaining the dignity and professionalism that Harrison seemed to doubt she possessed. The upcoming exercise would be more than just a training scenario. It would be an opportunity to prove that excellence in naval service was not determined by gender, but by competence, dedication, and leadership. Sarah intended to demonstrate all three in ways that would leave no room for doubt or qualification. The morning sun cast long shadows across the USS Leviathan's deck as Sarah made her way to the briefing room. She had spent the previous evening studying the mission parameters and reviewing the ship's capabilities, ensuring she was thoroughly prepared for whatever the SEALs might require. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, her bearing confident despite the doubts that Admiral Captain Harrison had attempted to plant in her mind. The briefing room was already occupied when she arrived. 6 men in Navy digital camouflage uniforms stood around a large table covered with charts and tactical displays. Their bearing was unmistakably military, but there was something different about them that immediately set them apart from regular Navy personnel. They moved with a fluid confidence that spoke of countless hours of training and real-world experience. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the ship's operations officer, was reviewing some documents at the head of the table. He looked up as Sarah entered and nodded in acknowledgement. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, Rodriguez said formally. Allow me to introduce the SEAL team leadership. This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, team leader. The man who stepped forward was of medium height but powerfully built, with close-cropped dark hair and alert green eyes. His handshake was firm without being aggressive, and his demeanor was professional but reserved. Sarah could sense him evaluating her, taking her measure in the way that experienced military personnel did when meeting someone new. Commander Webb, Sarah said, meeting his gaze directly. I'm looking forward to working with your team. Likewise, Webb replied, his tone neutral. Let me introduce my senior enlisted advisor, Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson. Jackson was an imposing figure, standing well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and arms that strained against his uniform sleeves. His dark skin showed the weathered marks of someone who had spent years in harsh environments, and his eyes held the steady confidence of a man who had seen everything the military could throw at him. Master Chief, Sarah acknowledged with a nod. Ma'am, Jackson replied, his voice a deep rumble that somehow managed to convey both respect and reservation. Webb continued the introductions, presenting the other team members. Petty Officer First Class Torres, a communications specialist with intense dark eyes and quick movements. Petty Officer Second Class Patterson, a demolitions expert whose calm demeanor belied his dangerous specialty. Petty Officer First Class Kumar, a sniper whose quiet presence seemed to fill more space than his slender frame would suggest, and Petty Officer Second Class Williams, a medic whose careful attention to detail was evident in everything he did. Each SEAL acknowledged the introduction professionally, but Sarah could sense their cautious assessment. These were men who trusted their lives to each other and to their equipment. They would need to be convinced that she belonged in that circle of trust before they would truly accept her leadership. "Shall we begin the operational briefing?" Webb asked, gesturing toward the tactical displays. Rodriguez activated a large screen that showed a detailed map of the coastal region where the exercise would take place. The scenario involves a simulated terrorist stronghold on a small island approximately 40 nautical miles from our current position. Intelligence indicates that high-value targets are being held in a fortified compound with unknown defensive capabilities. Sarah studied the display carefully, noting the island's topography and the limited approach routes. The target was situated on elevated ground with clear sight lines in all directions, making it a challenging objective for any assault force. Primary insertion will be via fast rope from helicopter at 0300 hours, Webb explained, pointing to a landing zone marked on the map. We'll have approximately 30 minutes to neutralize resistance, secure the objectives, and establish an extraction point before simulated enemy reinforcements arrive. "What's the extraction timeline?" Sarah asked, her mind already working through the coordination requirements. "Flexible, but ideally within 45 minutes of initial insertion," Webb replied. "If we encounter heavier resistance than anticipated, we may need emergency extraction." Sarah nodded, making mental notes about positioning requirements for the ship's boats and helicopter support. Weather conditions? Current forecast shows moderate seas with possible fog formation after midnight, Rodriguez answered. Visibility could be reduced during the operation window. "That actually works in our favor," Webb observed. "Reduced visibility helps with the approach, though it complicates extraction coordination." Sarah appreciated his tactical thinking. The SEALs clearly preferred to operate in conditions that maximize their advantages while minimizing enemy capabilities. Her job would be to ensure that naval support adapted to changing conditions without compromising the mission. Naval support elements include 2 rigid inflatable boats for backup extraction, helicopter coordination, and real-time intelligence updates from ship-based radar and communications, Rodriguez continued. Commander Mitchell will be coordinating all naval support from the ship's Combat Information Center. Webb looked at Sarah with renewed interest. "Have you worked with helicopter operations before?" "Yes," Sarah replied confidently. "I coordinated air support for 3 previous exercises and 2 real-world search and rescue operations. I'm familiar with the communication protocols and coordination requirements." Master Chief Jackson spoke up for the first time since introductions. "What about small boat operations? Our backup extraction might require close coordination with surface vessels. I've commanded both destroyer and frigate operations that included small boat deployments," Sarah answered. "I'm comfortable with the tactical requirements." She could see the SEALs exchanging glances, communicating in the subtle way that experienced teams developed over time. They were clearly sharing assessments and impressions, though their conclusions remained hidden. The key coordination points will be initial insertion timing, ongoing intelligence updates, and extraction management, Webb said, returning to the operational details. "We'll need real-time weather updates, especially regarding visibility conditions." "Understood," Sarah replied. "The ship's meteorological systems can provide updates every 15 minutes during the operation window. We can also monitor radio chatter and provide early warning if simulated enemy forces change their positioning." Torres, the communications specialist, leaned forward slightly. "What communication protocols will you be using?" "We operate on encrypted frequencies with specific authentication codes." Sarah had anticipated this question and had spent considerable time the previous evening reviewing the technical specifications. "We'll monitor your primary and backup frequencies while maintaining separate channels for naval coordination. Authentication will follow standard joint operations protocols." "That should work," Torres nodded, apparently satisfied with her technical knowledge. The briefing continued for another hour, covering everything from weather contingencies to emergency medical evacuation procedures. Sarah found herself impressed by the SEALs' thoroughness and attention to detail. They had clearly anticipated numerous potential complications and had developed response plans for each scenario. More importantly, she noticed that their initial wariness was beginning to fade as she demonstrated familiarity with military procedures and tactical thinking. Her answers were crisp and confident, showing that she understood not just the technical requirements, but also the underlying strategic considerations. When the formal briefing concluded, Webb lingered as the other team members filed out to begin their equipment preparations. "Commander," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." Webb glanced toward the door, ensuring they had privacy. "Admiral Captain Harrison briefed us yesterday evening. He seemed concerned about the mission coordination. Is there anything we should know about potential complications?" Sarah felt a surge of anger but kept her expression neutral. Harrison had apparently shared his doubts about her competence with the SEAL team, potentially undermining her authority before the mission even began. "What exactly did the Admiral Captain tell you?" she asked carefully. Webb looked uncomfortable, clearly regretting his decision to bring up the subject. "Nothing specific, just that this was a challenging assignment and that he wanted to ensure we had direct communication channels if coordination problems developed." Sarah realized that Harrison had essentially told the SEALs to bypass her authority if they had concerns. The implication was that she might not be reliable or competent enough to handle the coordination responsibilities. "I appreciate your directness, Commander Webb," Sarah said finally. "Let me be equally direct with you. I've been assigned this mission based on my qualifications and experience. I intend to execute it successfully. If you have concerns about coordination at any point during the operation, please bring them to me immediately. We'll resolve any issues together." Webb studied her for a moment, apparently weighing her words and demeanor. "Fair enough. My team doesn't care about politics or personalities. We care about mission success and keeping everyone safe. As long as you're focused on the same goals, we won't have any problems." "Those are exactly my priorities," Sarah assured him. As Webb left to rejoin his team, Sarah remained in the briefing room, staring at the tactical displays. Harrison's interference was more problematic than she had initially realized. By suggesting to the SEALs that she might be unreliable, he had created a situation where they would be watching for signs of failure rather than assuming competence. Rodriguez returned to the briefing room carrying additional charts and technical specifications. "Solid briefing," he observed. "The SEALs seem professional." "Did you know that Admiral Captain Harrison spoke to them separately?" Sarah asked. Rodriguez paused in his document sorting. "I heard he met with Commander Webb yesterday evening. I assumed it was routine command guidance. Apparently, he shared some concerns about mission coordination." Rodriguez's expression grew uncomfortable. "Look, Sarah, I don't know exactly what was said, but I wouldn't read too much into it. Harrison's old school and he worries about everything. He probably just wanted to make sure all the communication channels were clear." Sarah appreciated Rodriguez's attempt to downplay the situation, but she knew that Harrison's interference went beyond normal command concern. By undermining her authority with the SEAL team, he was actively sabotaging her chances of success. However, she also knew that dwelling on Harrison's prejudices would be counterproductive. The best response would be to execute the mission flawlessly, demonstrating that his concerns were both unfounded and inappropriate. "You're probably right," she said diplomatically. "Let's focus on mission preparation." For the rest of the day, Sarah threw herself into operational planning. She coordinated with the helicopter crews, briefed the boat teams, and established communication protocols with the Combat Information Center staff. Every detail was checked and double-checked to ensure smooth execution. As evening approached, she made a final tour of the ship's key operational areas. In the Combat Information Center, the watch team was preparing for the next day's exercise. The radar operators were familiar with the coastal geography, and the communication specialists had tested all equipment. On deck, the boat crews were conducting final equipment checks on the rigid inflatable boats that would serve as backup extraction vehicles. The crews were experienced and confident, and their boats were in perfect mechanical condition. In the helicopter operations area, the flight crew was reviewing weather forecasts and approach routes. They had flown similar missions before and were comfortable with the coordination requirements. Everything was ready. Sarah had done everything possible to ensure mission success, and she was confident in both her own abilities and those of her team. Tomorrow would prove whether Harrison's doubts were justified or whether they were simply the prejudices of an officer who couldn't accept that excellence came in different forms than he expected. As she returned to her quarters for the evening, Sarah felt a familiar mix of anticipation and determination. She had faced skeptical audiences before, and she had always responded by letting her performance speak for itself. Tomorrow would be no different, except that the stakes were higher and the audience more critical. The SEALs would judge her based on results rather than rhetoric. And that was exactly the kind of evaluation she preferred. They were professionals who understood that mission success depended on competence rather than appearances. If she could earn their respect, it would be based on genuine achievement rather than political correctness. Sarah was ready for that test. She had spent 15 years preparing for challenges exactly like this one, and she was confident that her preparation would prove sufficient. Tomorrow, she would show Admiral Captain Harrison and the SEAL team that her assignment was based on merit, not politics. The USS Leviathan's Combat Information Center hummed with quiet efficiency as Sarah took her position at the coordination station. Multiple screens displayed real-time data, radar contacts, weather conditions, communication frequencies, and tactical positions. The clock showed 02:45 hours, 15 minutes before the SEALs' scheduled helicopter insertion. "All stations report ready," announced Petty Officer First Class Martinez from the communications console. The bridge crew had been briefed on their roles, and every system was functioning perfectly. Sarah adjusted her headset and opened the primary communication channel to Commander Webb's team. "Phantom 6, this is Deep Blue. Radio check." "Deep Blue, Phantom 6. Good copy. Team is locked and loaded, standing by for insertion." The helicopter's rotors had been turning for 5 minutes, the aircraft positioned on the flight deck with its crew conducting final pre-flight checks. Sarah could see the SEAL team through the Combat Information Center's observation window. 6 figures in full tactical gear, moving with the precise efficiency of elite operators. "Weather update," reported the meteorological technician. "Surface winds at 8 knots, visibility 3 miles and decreasing. Fog bank is forming as predicted, should provide good concealment for approach." Sarah keyed her microphone. "Phantom 6, weather update. Winds favorable. Visibility decreasing to 3 miles. Fog formation on schedule." "Copy, Deep Blue. Visibility works in our favor. Request final clearance for insertion." Sarah checked her tactical display one more time. All naval support elements were in position. The backup extraction boats were stationed 2 miles from the target island. Helicopter fuel and maintenance crews were standing by, and the ship's radar was actively monitoring the operational area. "Phantom 6, you are cleared for insertion. Deep Blue standing by for ongoing support." "Roger, Deep Blue, Phantom 6 departing." Through the observation window, Sarah watched the helicopter lift off from the flight deck, its navigation lights quickly disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. The aircraft would follow a predetermined route to the target island, staying below radar detection altitude while approaching from the northwest. "Helicopter airborne, proceeding to target," reported the air traffic controller. "Flight path nominal, no contacts on approach route." Sarah monitored multiple communication channels simultaneously. The helicopter crew was providing updates on approach conditions, the boat teams were reporting their readiness status, and the SEALs would begin transmitting once they were on the ground. 12 minutes after takeoff, the helicopter's voice came through clearly. "Deep Blue, this is Wildcard 2-1. Approaching insertion point, target area quiet, no visible activity on infrared." "Copy. Wildcard 2-1. Phantom 6, are you ready for insertion?" Webb's voice was calm and focused. "Phantom 6 ready. We see the landing zone. Looks clear." "Understood. Execute insertion." The next few minutes were critical. The helicopter would hover while the SEAL team fast-roped to the ground, then immediately depart to avoid detection. If something went wrong during this phase, the entire mission could be compromised. "Phantom 6 on the ground," Webb reported. "Clean insertion, no contact. Wildcard 2-1 is clear." Sarah felt the first wave of satisfaction. The insertion had gone perfectly, exactly as planned. Now came the more complex phase of supporting the team's advance on their objective. Phantom 6, this is Deep Blue. Infrared satellite feed shows no movement around the target building. You have clear approach routes from your current position. Copy Deep Blue. Moving to Phase Line Alpha. The SEALs had planned their approach in segments, with predetermined checkpoints where they would report progress and receive updated intelligence. Sarah's job was to monitor their advance and provide early warning of any threats or complications. Deep Blue, Phantom 6. We're at Phase Line Alpha, no contact. Request updated intelligence on target building. Sarah consulted her multiple displays. The ship's radar could track large movements but couldn't penetrate buildings or identify individual personnel. However, she could provide information about weather changes, approaching vessels, or other factors that might affect the mission. Phantom 6, target area remains quiet. No surface contacts within 5 miles of your position. Weather holding steady, fog providing good concealment. Roger, Deep Blue. Proceeding to Phase Line Bravo. As the mission progressed, Sarah found herself settling into a comfortable rhythm of coordination and communication. The SEAL team was performing exactly as expected, and all naval support elements were functioning smoothly. Her months of training and preparation were paying off in the form of seamless execution. Deep Blue, Phantom 6, Webb's voice carried a new note of urgency. We have eyes on target building, multiple heat signatures visible through thermal imaging. Looks like we have actual personnel in the structure. Sarah frowned. The exercise scenario called for simulated opponents, not real people. She quickly consulted with Rodriguez, who was monitoring from a separate station. Could be exercise controllers or safety observers, Rodriguez suggested through their internal communication system. Phantom 6, can you identify the nature of personnel in target building? Exercise scenario calls for simulated opposition only. Deep Blue, these appear to be real people, not exercise mannequins or electronic signatures. We count at least 6 individuals in the main structure. Sarah realized that something had gone wrong with the exercise planning. Real personnel should not have been in the target area during a SEAL training operation. This was both a safety concern and a potential mission complication. Phantom 6, hold position while we verify exercise parameters. Sarah immediately contacted the Exercise Control Center aboard the ship. After several minutes of hurried communication, the exercise controller confirmed that real personnel were indeed in the target building. Maintenance workers who had been scheduled to complete repairs after the exercise but had arrived early. This created a complex tactical problem. The SEALs couldn't proceed with their simulated assault while real people were in the target area, but aborting the mission would waste months of preparation and training. Deep Blue, Phantom 6. What's our status? We're exposed in our current position. Sarah quickly assessed the options. The maintenance workers needed to be safely evacuated from the target area, but doing so might alert any actual exercise observers to the SEAL team's presence, compromising the training value of the operation. Phantom 6, stand by while we develop a modified plan. Working with Rodriguez and the exercise controller, Sarah quickly developed an alternative approach. The maintenance workers would be quietly evacuated through a back entrance while the SEAL team shifted to a different observation position. Once the area was clear, the exercise could proceed as planned. Phantom 6, here's the new plan, Sarah transmitted, outlining the modified approach. Copy, Deep Blue. Good thinking. We'll reposition and wait for your all clear. The evacuation took 20 minutes to complete, during which Sarah coordinated between multiple groups: the maintenance supervisors who needed to recall their workers, the exercise controllers who had to modify their scenario, and the SEAL team who had to remain concealed while the area was cleared. When the target area was finally secure, the exercise resumed with new parameters that reflected the changed conditions. The SEALs adapted quickly, demonstrating the flexibility that made them elite operators. Deep Blue, Phantom 6, we have secured the objective. All simulated hostile forces neutralized, all simulated hostages recovered, ready for extraction. Outstanding, Phantom 6. Extraction boats are proceeding to pickup point. Estimate 10 minutes to your location. As the exercise moved into its final phase, Sarah felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Despite the unexpected complications, everything had been handled smoothly and professionally. The SEAL team had accomplished their mission. The naval support had functioned flawlessly, and no one had been injured or endangered. Deep Blue, Phantom 6. Extraction complete. All personnel aboard extraction boats and proceeding to ship. Copy, Phantom 6. Welcome home. As the boats approached the USS Leviathan, Sarah prepared for the post-mission debrief. This was always a critical phase where lessons learned were identified and future improvements were planned. In the ship's briefing room 30 minutes later, the entire mission team gathered for the formal after-action review. Commander Webb stood at the front of the room, with his characteristic calm professionalism. Overall, this was an exceptional exercise, he began. Despite significant complications that weren't part of the original scenario, coordination remained smooth throughout. The naval support team demonstrated exactly the kind of flexibility and competence that special operations require. Master Chief Jackson nodded in agreement. The real-time problem-solving when we discovered personnel in the target area was particularly impressive. Most coordination teams would have either aborted the mission or created a safety hazard trying to proceed. Commander Mitchell's solution was both safe and tactically sound. Sarah felt a warmth of satisfaction at the recognition, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Thank you, Master Chief. The team performed excellently throughout. Webb continued his assessment. Communication was clear and timely, intelligence updates were accurate and relevant, and extraction coordination was perfect. From our perspective, this is exactly the kind of naval support that enables successful special operations. Torres, the communications specialist, added his own observation. The frequency management and authentication protocols worked flawlessly. We never had any communication problems despite changing weather conditions. As the debrief continued, each SEAL team member offered their perspectives on different aspects of the mission. Their assessments were consistently positive, focusing on specific examples of effective coordination and professional execution. When the formal debrief concluded, Webb approached Sarah privately. "Commander, I want to apologize for something," he said quietly. "Admiral Captain Harrison suggested yesterday that we might encounter coordination problems during this mission. Based on what we've seen today, those concerns were completely unfounded. You and your team performed at the highest professional level." Sarah appreciated his directness. "Thank you, Commander. I'm glad we could work together effectively." "More than effectively," Webb emphasized. "This was some of the best naval coordination I've experienced in 15 years of special operations. My team will specifically request to work with you again if future joint exercises are planned." Master Chief Jackson joined their conversation. "Ma'am, the team asked me to tell you something. We've worked with a lot of naval officers over the years, and some of them treat us like we're just another piece of equipment to be managed. You treated us like professional partners, and that makes all the difference in mission success." Sarah was touched by the recognition. These were men whose respect had to be earned through demonstrated competence, and their approval meant more than any formal commendation. "I appreciate that, Master Chief. Professional respect goes both ways. Your team's adaptability and professionalism made my job much easier." As the SEAL team prepared to depart the USS Leviathan the following morning, they made a point of formally thanking Sarah and her coordination team. Webb presented her with a SEAL team coin, a tradition that recognized exceptional support from outside personnel. "This is from the entire team," he said during the brief ceremony. "It represents our appreciation for professional excellence and outstanding coordination under challenging circumstances." The presentation took place on the ship's main deck, with most of the crew watching. Admiral Captain Harrison was also present, having emerged from his office to observe the departure ceremony. Master Chief Jackson stepped forward and addressed the assembled crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's been our honor to work with Lieutenant Commander Mitchell and this ship's coordination team. Professional excellence is something we recognize wherever we find it, and we found it here." The other SEAL team members nodded their agreement, and Torres added, "We've worked with naval coordination teams around the world. This team sets the standard for how joint operations should be conducted." As the SEALs prepared to board their transport helicopter, each team member took a moment to personally thank Sarah. Their words were brief but heartfelt. reflecting genuine appreciation for her professionalism and competence. Webb was the last to speak. Commander, if you ever decide to apply for special operations training, my recommendation would carry significant weight. You have the tactical thinking and leadership skills that special ops requires. Sarah was honored by the suggestion, though she was committed to her current naval career path. Thank you, Commander. That means a great deal coming from you. As the helicopter lifted off carrying the SEAL team back to their home base, Sarah noticed Admiral Captain Harrison approaching. His expression was unreadable, but she sensed that his perspective might have changed based on what he had witnessed. Commander Mitchell, he said formally. Yes, sir. Harrison paused, apparently choosing his words carefully. The SEAL team's assessment of your performance was quite positive. Yes, sir. It was an excellent exercise. Indeed. Harrison looked out at the departing helicopter, then back at Sarah. It appears that my concerns about this assignment were overstated. The mission was executed with exceptional professionalism. Sarah recognized that this was as close to an apology as she was likely to receive from Harrison. He was acknowledging that his doubts had been wrong without explicitly admitting his prejudicial assumptions. Thank you, sir. I believe the exercise accomplished all of its training objectives. Harrison nodded slowly. Yes, it certainly did. He paused again, then added, I'll be noting your performance in my official report to Naval Special Warfare Command. They should know that this ship can provide the kind of coordination that special operations require. As Harrison walked away, Sarah felt a deep sense of vindication. She had proven her competence not through arguments or complaints, but through flawless professional execution. The SEALs had judged her based on performance rather than prejudice, and their verdict had been unambiguous. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez approached as she watched Harrison disappear into the ship's superstructure. Well, he said with a slight smile, I think it's safe to say that you've changed some minds around here. Sarah nodded, feeling satisfied but not triumphant. She had done exactly what she had set out to do. Execute her assigned mission with the same professionalism and competence that had characterized her entire naval career. The mission succeeded because everyone did their job, she replied diplomatically. True, Rodriguez agreed, but leadership made the difference when complications arose. The SEALs recognized that, and so did Admiral Captain Harrison, whether he admits it or not. As the USS Leviathan resumed its normal operations, Sarah reflected on the lessons of the past 2 days. She had faced skepticism and prejudice from her own commanding officer, had been forced to prove herself to elite special operations personnel, and had successfully managed a complex mission despite unexpected complications. Most importantly, she had demonstrated that excellence in naval service was determined by competence, professionalism, and leadership rather than by gender or political considerations. The SEALs' respect had been earned through performance, and their public recognition had effectively silenced any questions about her qualifications. The experience had been challenging, but it had also been deeply satisfying. Sarah had proven to herself and to others that she belonged at any level of naval operations, working with any personnel under any circumstances. Her assignment had been based on merit, and her execution had justified that decision completely. As she returned to her regular duties, Sarah carried with her the SEAL team coin and the knowledge that she had earned the respect of some of the military's most elite personnel. More importantly, she had demonstrated that professional excellence was the only standard that truly mattered in naval service. The mission had been a success in every measurable way, and Sarah looked forward to future challenges with renewed confidence. She had proven that she belonged wherever the Navy chose to assign her, and no amount of skepticism or prejudice could change that fundamental truth.